Good morning, and thank you, Seth. It's a pleasure to be kicking off this conference about smart content with an overview of the history of content. Now, when Seth approached me with this topic, it was obviously a challenge to do this in, less than 10 minutes. But it's one that's familiar to me, to be certain. My book, Content Nation, published by John Wiley, covers the past, present, and future of social media publishing. And my new book, being developed online, called The Second Web, will focus on how the convergence of social, mobile, and center-based communications is creating a world that lives and depends on pervasive content for its survival and growth. So covering 20,000 years of history of content in a few minutes seemed like, well, a fun idea. So we're going to take you on a little journey now through the history of content. First, what it is, then where it came from, where it is today, where it's going, and how smart content fits into this amazing story. So what is content anyway? It seems like we talk about it an awful lot these days, but usually the exact definition escapes people. It's, the stuff, the things that we're trying to produce. At Shore, though, we came up with a more exact definition of content. We realize that content is not really the stuff, but what makes us care about the stuff. We call content information and experiences that give value to audiences in specific context. In other words, if you have something that audiences don't really value, it's not really content. For example, this photo shows the very first audio recording, which was produced in France about 17 years before Thomas Edison's famous recording. The problem, though, is that the inventor didn't invent a way to play it back. It wasn't until a few years ago that David Giovannoni figured out how to get sound from this recording using computer technologies. Until then, it really wasn't audio content. It was just scribbles on a piece of paper. No audience with a valuable context, no content. More than 10,000 years ago, the meaning of content was pretty clear. Content was about leaders and peers telling stories to close-knit tribal communities. The experience of a community sharing those stories was the clear value point for content. But then things got more complicated. We started to own things and to trade things with other tribes. It was easy to lose track of complex social interactions like contracts. So oral traditions began to give way to publishing, using objects as content that could organize our human relations. Publishing turned out to be one of the most powerful human inventions ever. Laws and contracts were published on large stone tablets. In effect, publishing became the DNA of society, enabling large groups of people to be organized for a common purpose, a social organism defined by content. As powerful as publishing was, though, it had a key weakness. The highly centralized control of publishing led to inflexible methods of organizing people. Civilizations would rise and fall in a matter of centuries, short-lived social organisms at best. Fortunately, the manual copying and archiving of publications continued even after the fall of major civilizations, enabling content to live on through time, even if few people knew about it or understood it. And then, with the rise of movable type printing in the 15th century, the cheap mass production of content became a reality for the first time, and with it, mass literacy. In some ways, this gave rise to the powerful mass media that we know today. But in the broader scheme of history, mass production of content was also the beginning of another important movement, enabling everyday people to produce their own content for consumption by broader and more dispersed audiences. At first, with cheap printing came pamphlets like Common Sense that changed history, then phones, then citizens band radio, and finally, the internet and mobile communications networks, where anyone could produce text, audio, and video for global consumption. So in a broad sense, you might say that the printing press was the first step in moving content back back to its roots as a tool that enables communities to communicate with their peers and leaders. Only now the tribal campfires around which we tell our stories are lit with the screens of mobile phones, tablets, PCs, and other devices that enable people to find, publish, and share content from more than 1 billion people around the world. So you might say that the history of content is the story of humankind rediscovering its humanity. To publish is to be human. It's one of our most basic human functions. Poor and illiterate people, children in the alleys of New Delhi, that see a computer screen for the first time know instinctively how to use it to create content without any instruction and to teach others how to use it and to collaborate with them. People of all cultures around the world, including headhunters in New Guinea, were delighted to be a part of Matt Harding's Where in the Hell is Matt videos because they understood the joy of publishing, the simplest acts of being human. Step by step, we are reclaiming humankind's heritage as a species that publishes by default, a movement being accelerated as billions more people around the world are encountering electronic publishing tools and networks for the very first time. Watch these other 5 billion people carefully. They will be the foundation for some of the most profound changes in our global culture in the years ahead. In the meantime, publishing of all kinds is focusing more and more on the complex value of human relationships. Even in the sciences, understanding who understands specific areas of study and their relationships with one another is becoming a key factor today in creating valuable information and experiences. So, if publishing is the DNA of society, you might say that today's publishing technologies are enabling a major mutation of our publishing genes. Publishing is becoming a tool which is enabling the rapid contextualization of our physical and social environments and our abilities to influence one another in more ways than ever before. Key to these new capabilities are the technologies that we'll be discussing here today. Understanding the semantic context of content, data analytics, the translation and support of multiple languages, trillions of sensor inputs around the world, and even new technologies that interpret human gestures. With content in the context of inputs coming from any network delivered on any device, we can look forward to creating more flexible and adaptive societies in the years ahead. The result of this new DNA will be smart content. Content that has the sophisticated understanding of context that helps to make complex content simple. As tools such as augmented reality, that's seen in this picture, enters our lives, the world itself is becoming a rich landscape of vibrant content that is changing how we live our daily lives. We have indeed come full circle. We're back to being able to take on valuable contextual opportunities with the right tools at the right time. We are, like our Ice Age ancestors, still chasing the mammoth, but on a global scale with tribes that come and go as they please. With the enormous changes and challenges ahead of us as a species, you might say that our new publishing DNA has come along at just the right time. We need to adapt to rapid environment and resource shifts that will require us to make use of new technologies, such as pervasive sensors and organic computing to power the growth of future civilizations using pervasive global publishing. Through it all, we'll be learning how to be global and tribal simultaneously. A true content nation turning publishing from being a series of machines into a living global organism. So there's about 20,000 years of publishing in the past and maybe 10 or 15,000 years in the future. Is that about the right framework? I think so. And in less than 10 minutes. And with that as just kind of setting of the table, I invite our first panel to come up for our first discussion here. They're going to be leading us through some of their experiences that bring us here and what their vision is for smart content. We're fortunate to have with us coming up to the stage Natasha Natasha Vogel, who's an EVP with Edelman Strategy 1. We have Mark Stefik, a research fellow from the Palo Alto Research Center. And coming to the stage now is Mike Lavitt, who's the Director of Online and Editorial Production at Aviation Week, a McGraw-Hill company. So welcome, panel. I'm very pleased that we have you here today. So the challenge for us here, oops, where's the rest of my slides? If you could flip it back, I have the questions there. That kind of helps me. I get a little bit brain dead sometimes. No. Cool. Pop that up. This next slide. View show. Okay, that's it. Go, 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 go. One more. Go. Beautiful. Okay, so panelists, here we are. We're trying to give people your vision for what smart content's about. And if I could ask each of you from left to right to introduce yourself and what brings you here and what's the big problem that you're trying to solve with smart content. Natasha, could you kick us off, please?
Sure. Natasha Vogel, EVP at Strategy 1, which is the division of Edelman Public Relations. I'm responsible for the secondary measurement practice, including all secondary. Sure. That's good. How's that? It's better? Should I repeat that or no? Okay, excellent. Natasha Vogel, EVP at Strategy 1, which is a division of Edelman Public Relations. Strategy 1 is a global market research firm, and I'm responsible for secondary research and measurement worldwide. What brings me here today? About 6 years ago, I had the fortune of joining this industry, coming from a background mostly in information technology and consulting. I immediately stumbled upon doing traditional media analysis, and 6 years ago put out an RFP for a text analytics partner. After some evaluation, we selected Clearforest, and we were very, very pleased to be able to shorten the life cycle of traditional media analysis, at least in half, offer quick response of delivery, better pricing, right, so we're more competitive. And then fast forward 6 years to today's environment, where now we're kind of the opportunity that presents itself is the convergence of primary and mobile research, traditional owned, new, and social media. And that really, that challenge or opportunity is, why I'm sitting here at this table.
So I'm Mark Stefik. I'm a research fellow at the Palo Alto Research Center. Some people know it as Xerox PARC. So how did I get started in this, I guess, was the question. Actually, at least one starting point would be just after 9/11, right here in the city. And a lot of people at PARC were very moved by the events of that day. I had just become manager of one of the laboratories at PARC, which had computational linguists and user interface people and a number of different fields. And we felt moved to see if we could help with the analysis, which seemed to be breaking down. And then participated in some projects with the three-letter agencies in DC to see whether we could help them on those problems. The area that we were working, we called actually sense making, which was how does a person who is, we're talking about information overload here, how does one, given large amounts of information, focus and find answers to the kinds of things that are important in that moment. Fast forward a few years, about 4 years ago, I decided to stop being a manager and went back into research. And I was challenged to find a way to, in a sense, bring more powerful machine learning technologies into more powerful representations that people were using. There's a sort of story underneath that, but I was interested at that time in the concept of an information diet. the idea that each of us has certain things that we need to follow. Almost all of us have some mainstream interests and have also some very specialized interests. How does that kind of information get delivered to us over when we need it? I'll be giving a lightning talk on the things that I have to say about that, but I guess I'll just start with a kind of a question, maybe to provoke us a little bit. If you imagine the things that you need to find out about during the day, I suspect probably you've got a few things which are sort of mainstream that you share with a lot of other people. And maybe if you're like me, there's some mainstream interests which are absolutely boring for you that you never turn to, certain sections of the paper you never open. And yet there's also certain kinds of subjects that you actually care about that appear in no regular newspaper. So in a sense, if I get up in the morning and I say, how do I get prepared for my day? What should I be told? Some of it's going to be mainstream. Some of it's going to be specialized, maybe from business colleagues, and some of it might be very personalized. Do I want the system to provide me information based on my past behavior, or what my friends are reading, or what the editors are saying, or what some machine learning system is asking me? So I think I'll leave the question hanging like that because I think we'll be poking at that in a number of different ways. But those were the kinds of questions which moved me to get back into this field again.
Mike?
Morning. My name is Mike Lavitt. I'm the Director of Editorial Production and Editorial and Online Production for Aviation Week. And I have pretty much a journalistic background, but I was also a digital pioneer. I first started working for a teletext and videotext service in the Chicago area in 1982. After doing that for a couple of years and working for another company here in New York that was making some efforts in that direction, I got tired of working at companies that were going out of business. And so I went back to newspapers for a while and then found my way to Aviation Week. I guess we've all had that experience with companies going out of business. When Seth first asked me to sit on this panel, I looked at who I was replacing and saw Mark's bio. And I thought, wow, do I belong on a dais with these guys? But as I thought about it and talked with one of my coworkers, we've had to be visionaries in our own right. At Palo Alto, they've one of the meccas of internet research, and I haven't developed a content management system from scratch. But on the other hand, here's where we started. Aviation Week's been around since 1916, 13 years after the Wright brothers' first flight. So to take what didn't really change that much from 1916 until I joined Aviation Week in 1988, we had 4-color, but we were still printing on paper. It really hadn't changed all that much. So to go from there to where we are today, okay, that fits. I'm here because we've used some new technologies that really help drive our site. One thing that we have not done is staffed up greatly to support our online efforts. So we're still doing everything we were doing in print, and we have 4 monthly magazines, 3 paid newsletters, and a database that used to be a 2-volume thing that looked sort of like the New York phone book, white pages and yellow pages, but now is entirely online. So we didn't add to the staff of print people who were writing and producing the content that went into those magazines, newsletters, and so forth. So we had to get smart with the technology that we've used. And we started using a content management system, Interwoven's team site, more than 10 years ago. And earlier this year, we started using Themis's Luxid system to help identify entities and drive some interesting features in our website that I'll be showing you later. So I think our big challenge, to get to John's question, is how to get people to use our service more. The Aviation Week Intelligence Network is our paid site, and we get a pretty good price for people to use it. So we really want them to use it and find it indispensable. So anything we can do to drive usage, and a lot of that involves creating better connections among the different content types that we have. So
Thanks very much. And I think what you're seeing here is a good spread of the things that we're going to be talking about in the next day or so. We have B2C communications, we have B2B communications, and we have the enabling technologies behind that that are trying to deploy smart content. The real question, though, is that, if this is the big framework, what is smart content really doing for you to address those pain points? What's the value, the aha, if you will, to go to the definition of content that really makes it worth your while and transforms what you're trying to do?
Well, I'd agree with your sentiment earlier, that the content, the definition of smart content is in the eye of the stakeholder. From my perspective, we help a number of B2B companies mine social media and traditional media. We also look at primary research to develop insights that would be particularly relevant, for a given audience, whether it's on a specific issue, whether it's somewhat predictive, so maybe an analysis of trends over a period of time. And then, I think of companies like Netflix that have been so smart about how they've set up their data as an asset in their infrastructure to capture, that data and to predict what users are going to want to see, in movies. A number of other companies are catching up in that respect, do a favorable job like eBay. And I think for us, we think about how do we use data that comes from our clients married with, primary and secondary research data to develop, insights that are relevant for them that become, in effect, smart.
So grinding through the information to find the forest in the trees in the forest, so to speak, to make reference to the product that you got there.
That's right.
We'll come back to the semantic aspect of that in a little bit, though. Mark, what are you really trying to get at there? What's the aha point?
I think that, it's like I've been framed a little bit to speak to technology things, and I'll name one technology thing, then I'm going to turn your question sideways a little bit for a bit. I think that one of the things that I looked at the hardest was a really basic question. I'll tell you what inspired me to work on the particular thing that I'll be showing you this afternoon, which will be about that. Somebody at Park had done it was actually Stu Card and Ed Schiefer, any of you folks who know the research community, had built this thing called 3Book. It's a little bit blasé right now, but this is a few years ago, and it was a demonstration of some particular books, and you could turn the pages. Anybody who's using Flipboard or something right now knows exactly what I'm talking about, how it feels when the pages go by. And I was sitting with the biz dev team, and I had seen the WYSI pages going by, and I liked them, but there was something else about it that took my breath away, which was there's a point where a person in the book would type a query about looking for information inside the book, and what it would do, it would flip to the index at the back of the book, those page-oriented indexes at the back, topically organized, and it would take the whole thing and zip it down to a top half a dozen topics or so and highlight exactly the pages. So I remember one of the books was a book on user interfaces, and somebody had typed in a query for Ben Peterson, who's a professor at the University of Maryland. And it said, oh, do you mean his PAD++ project? Do you mean his lab at the University of Maryland? Do you mean all these different things he had done? And I said, wow, I didn't know the question I was trying to ask, and yet this furthered the conversation forward. So what I want to say about this is there's this give and take between a system understanding what your interests are, and we can assume whether it's a search system or whether a system which is delivering information to you that you don't always know or can't articulate exactly what it is you're looking for. So I think that this business about content belies the notion that there's an underlying intelligence of some kind with which we're having a dialogue. And I want to toss that out. Maybe I'll keep this short and leave that one idea out there and come back to other ones next and give you a shot.
Sure. I described our portfolio of products, and really 10 years ago it was a bunch of silos, and we had all kinds of stories about Boeing programs over here, and over here in the database we had detailed listings about Boeing, detailed information, and that was true for thousands of companies. And there was no easy way for people to get back and forth. You could have had an army of coders doing manual links, but that really wouldn't work. That would be talk about herding cats. That would be totally unmanageable. So it was really having a way of integrating the data and guiding our customers from one piece of information or content to another related piece of information or content. We're also doing a lot more now with integrating data from other sources, because there is no one single ideal source of the kind of data that we have. We have one provider who gives us information on commercial airline fleets, another provider that gives us information on business aviation fleets, and a third that has military fleets. And we've chosen them because they're the best in each of those areas, but honestly, they're not very good in the others, if they play there at all. So we really need to be integrating more and more outside data feeds. On our free website, we're doing more with social media. I see that transitioning gradually to the paid information. But if you have to look at the background of the people who were paying us for the information, it started as a service that was paid for by corporate librarians out of their budgets, and they didn't want people looking at blogs or chatting or watching videos. They thought people should come in and get the information that they want. Think about the high school librarian. But now that's starting to change. They're saying, well, you have these blogs on your free site. Why can't we search that information on the paid site? So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to suit the needs of individual customers. So if one company wants all the social media content on our paid site, which is called the Aviation Week Intelligence Network, or AWIN, and another doesn't, we're going to have to find ways of turning it on and off, making it visible or not visible, depending on what they want. So I think that will be the challenge over the next couple of years.
It's an interesting variety of responses there. They're all kind of pointing to a change in attitude towards information retrieval and assembly. As you mentioned, the library there, indexing used to be about finding the answer. And somewhere out there was some piece of content, a document or whatever, that had the answer. Now we're coming up with systems using smart content that are trying to respond to questions where the answer may not exist yet, and where the question itself may be part of the answer. And your point earlier, Mark, on disambiguation of it being not necessarily just saying you're wrong, but the starting point of a conversation about the answer is very key. So it seems like the power of these technologies is creating very different value points. We're using horsepower to be able to figure out, to sift through all this information that's coming through the media and social media outlets. We're trying to assemble answers for specific customers on the fly. But it's not necessarily about coming up with the perfect answer. It's about finding the right things that people need at the moment. How does that immediacy and the need to apply smart content to immediate needs affect what you're trying to do today?
Well, we actually have some theories around that. So I'm just going to mention this for people who want to follow up on the sort of scientific base, called information foraging theory. So there's a book out by Pete Paroli on that subject, and that book basically takes the notion that we as informivores, I'm going to try to avoid these $50 words here, but information seeking behavior, it draws an analogy to biological behaviors. So the spider who waits, the tiger who hunts, the foraging patch, which is rich. So we all have, in a sort of attention-based economy, we have so much time to go look for information, to take it in, how much time we're willing to devote to different sorts of things. So in fact, I think that when we're exposed to systems, we're looking for an answer, and if it isn't coming up quickly, never mind, I'm probably not going to find it here, or things which absolutely draw us in, and then and cause us to be interested and pursue the answer because we're getting enough of an intelligent conversation. It's the difference between talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about and somebody who's just wasting your time, just filling the airwaves with something, holding the conversation. But thanks very much, got to go now. And I wanted to just sort of, to what extent when we're interacting with our systems do we get the sense that we're interacting with a system which knows what we need, which is actually helpful for us in finding what we need. And I wanted to raise one other kind of question on this thing, if I may, just for a second here. We were talking last night about some of this, and I recounted a story about my stepson, who's now looking for time to go to grad school, Dad. I think I want to go to school in new media. And I'm telling you this because I think this question of, well, what technology matters right now is actually up for us, whether we're vendors creating things, whether we're doing the research on it, or whether we're consumers. So I said, Ryan, I said, if you go get a new program, which is called a new media program, it's going to be looking really old in about 3 years. And he said, well, what do I, he said, I know I got to learn programming. I'll learn Java and C++. And I said, Ryan, from the perspective that matters right now, those are about the same thing, and it's not the right answer. Let me give you an example. And I took him to a thing that I'd worked on over the last couple of weeks, which I just want to share with you by way of an example. On another project I'm working on, we had just gotten a bunch of data about traffic and parking and citations in New Orleans. And and nobody had ever analyzed it carefully before. And I said, so Ryan, what do we do with this? Well, we had a meeting every morning about 7 o'clock, and I called all these guys in. We had several programmers and guys, and I said, first of all, we were pulling the data in, we noticed there were addresses inside there. So somebody began hooking up the geocoders. And then there was a business about the addresses being written incorrectly or being differently, so there's the ambiguity or variations in the writing of the addresses. So then there was the kinds of displays, questions. Every day we sort of poured into the data and tried to see what kinds of things we could conclude from it. And in about a week, we had a whole series of different kinds of insights. One I was talking about last night was, who do you think has the greatest number of violations? Well, it turns out it's the UPS and FedEx guys, who when they pull in for parking, they say, don't got time to stop, can't find a parking place, I'll double park now.
We found that out in New York a while ago.
Okay, so makes perfect sense. They didn't know that in New Orleans yet. Okay?
Yeah.
And then we said, well, what's happening with what's happening with the tourists? Well, some of the tourists, we said, what's a tourist? They have an out-of-state license plate or they have a rental car. So we mapped, well, where are those violations happening? Well, the rental cars were all in the French Quarter, and the out-of-state was all by the university. That means that by the university is actually students who haven't upgraded their license plate numbers. What I'm getting, they're renewed for the state. My point to this is there's an emerging a kind of technology where you build the systems that get answers and derive and provide information to people out of the pieces that are available. There's a kind of a discipline of sort of information architecture, and we don't have a name for that right now. So Ryan said, well, this is pretty good. You were working with Lance, and I said, I'll bet he was better at it than you were because he just graduated. Like the geocoding stuff you were talking about. I said, no, yeah, I graduated years ago. Lance graduated 6 years ago, and geocoders weren't in effect yet. Oh, I mean, my point on that is that this field is changing really fast. And there's these different kinds of pieces that people who want to build those systems that answer questions quickly, different kinds of tools like of the sort I imagine we'll be hearing today from the lightning talks, that are being composable. So a person who's an information specialist now has to be able to compose and use these things with an effort to create these intelligent systems that answer questions. And all the technologies have got a variety of limitations in terms of where they can understand the semantics and actually be helpful. And if you don't understand those things, you probably can't put them together in a sensible way. So that engineering discipline is emerging, and it's emerging rapidly right now. And that's the point I wanted to make.
It's an interesting point. I was at a conference on geotagging no more than about 3 years ago. And, it's the usual young folks there with bright ideas and, talking about what they could do. And none of it you were seeing on any of the platforms. And now today, things like Foursquare and Google Maps with GPS capabilities are beginning to dominate the context, what people are trying to figure out. And that kind of brings me back to the point that I'm not giving up on, which is immediacy. And, trying to understand how do we meet demands in terms of what's happening right now and what people want right now. And, Mark, you mentioned before as to, what you're doing with digital asset management
Yes.
to be able to explode, Business Week, Aviation Week's assets there. Pardon me, Mike. And, what are the, what's the now aspect of stuff? I'm not forgetting you. What's the now aspect of stuff that you're trying to get at with these types of technologies?
Well, I think a big part of it is make it easier for the users to find information too. Because right now, I talked about the connectivity, the interconnectedness, but another issue is that we have really deep data and nobody knows how to find it. If you use our database search tool, it has a very sophisticated interface. I can find you companies that make airframe components within a certain zip code. But nobody knows how to use that really complex search screen. So I think the immediacy would be giving people the answer they need right now without having to master this thing. It really takes a long time to learn how to use. So I think that could be one of the answers.
So, being able to solve their workflow problems that are cropping up on the fly.
Right, and
innovative solutions for innovative problems.
right, and workflow, exactly. We really want our service to be something that is integrated into people's daily workflow that they're using throughout the day. We're traditionally thought of as a news source, aviation leak, they call us at the Pentagon. We want to build on that and offer higher value content that people will pay, because news has sort of been commoditized. And although we have news that nobody else does, that's a tougher and tougher value proposition.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're trying to do with more different types of content that you've never had before, and you may not have necessarily until the moment that the request comes in. You have to be able to put it in.
Asking journalists who were used to carrying around a notebook, taking notes, and coming back and writing a story on a computer, now we're asking them to do video, to do events, we've done podcasts, to do multimedia things, and that's a challenge.
Now, Natasha, from a consumer standpoint, it's a little bit of a different problem. You're in the sea of opinion, if you will, and you're trying to organize it and do sentiment analysis and to focus people's marketing. What's the now aspect of that you're trying to respond to with your clients?
Well, we're constantly monitoring. I'm going to guess that many of you have are in some way related to potentially monitoring technologies that might monitor social media. So we're constantly monitoring for our clients, whether it's an emerging issue or trend that may pop up, or an existing topic. But we're very much aligning what we review to their business and their communications objectives. So what we might do is immediately respond with something we see as being a potential issue. We've been doing trend analysis for a number of years, where we just pull in data that comes from all media, and we look for maybe like mobile trends, and then we look to see the share of conversation that maybe a given company might have in specific mobile trends, to look and see what's emerging. So what we do is we share that with our clients so that they have a good understanding that there's some conversation that's beginning to happen here. We've been watching it over a period of a few months. You're nowhere in this conversation. What are your business plans in order to be a part of this? Are you developing any products to be able to meet this need? This may be something that you might want to keep an eye on. But I think that it's really determining how much faster can we get the data to our clients, because it's sometimes a function of they need to act fast. Maybe they're acting as a result of some big issue that just happened within their business operation that may have hit the media. And for us, it's finding ways to leverage the technology that we have in place, but then also a team of analysts and some potential offshore model that we have to respond to that faster than our competitors.
So it's both keeping up with the initial demand and also trying to keep on top of the sea of stuff that's out there. By the way, we're kind of coming up to the point where it may be good for people to start asking questions. So if there's stuff that's queued up, I'm glad to field something now. Darrell? So the question is, how do your competitors' content sources factor into your strategy here?
Yeah, I think that's a bridge we haven't really crossed yet. We have certainly not with our direct competitor who we're trying to steal business from. We do, some of the information providers we work with have some overlap with us, and they might provide more customized data than we offer, so we're taking a slice of it and offering it, and then giving people an opportunity to, if they want something more, to get it directly from them. I think we've made some inroads in those areas. We could probably do more. It's more partnering with people who have like interests, I think, than partnering with competitors.
You go to Macy's for a particular reason, and then you go over to the Toomey shop for another particular reason, and then you go to the Brooks Brothers for another reason. So you want to have that user to stay in your ecosystem, but you want to make sure that it's a reciprocal ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So I'll speak to that a little bit too. The piece of technology I'll be talking about during the lightning talks is, as I said, was a sort of a classification system, but it's based on a concept which hasn't really come up this morning yet, which is curation. And if you think about curation in the line of a news organization, like perhaps Aviation Week or something, they have their own publications, as you say, and there's a limit in terms of what they can cover, and that's true for any mainstream organization as well. So they will focus on, the head, using the long tail language, they will focus on the head of it. They can go a certain distance down the tail, and that's it. And so one of the questions is when they're trying to expand readership or hold their readers' interests, if they've got an information diet which goes beyond the borders of what they can cover, one of the things that we've been working with them on is to say, okay, you have neither the editors nor the content that go deeper down the tail. So how can we help making curation be an easier thing? And so one of the things that we've been working on is this business of simplifying curation. And we want to fit that into the overall ecosystem we've been talking about here. And if we just look at news organizations in general, everybody, I thought it was interesting you said you wanted to be in a business where nobody was going out of business. And I'm thinking, now I'll tell you about news organizations, right? Well, but one of the things about them trying to go down the tail is that how to make curation be easier. It's one thing that's destabilizing the organization is the method of delivery is changing. Tablets, to some extent the web and stuff like that. Method of collection is being changed. We have citizen journalism, hyperlocal news, things like that. And now we're saying with our technology, the editorial job just is changing too. We're going to make editing or curating be a whole lot easier, just to destabilize us on all fronts, as this organization is, or this business is really reshaping itself. And so in effect, for the technology we've been playing with, a curator gets to say which sources they trust. They get to say how the information should be organized topically, and then the rest of it's done by machine. Okay, and so that's an effort to. This makes it easier for them to go down the tail because they can use outside curators and so on in that part of it. Go ahead.
We are doing that to an extent. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Moreover. We have two feeds from them, one on our free site, one on our paid site, and we're looking at doing some more of that, integrating it more directly. Until now, the content that comes from Moreover is kind of in its own little area, and we're clearly, we want to be very clear about what's our content, what we've developed ourselves, what's exclusive to us, and what we're taking from other sources. And I think we'll always make that labeling clear, but I think we're going to integrate feeds from other information providers more directly with the news that we have too. I think that's the direction we're moving in.
Michael, you mentioned...
If people could announce their name and their organization, that would be great.
I'm Michelle. I'm the editor of eContent Magazine. Michael, you mentioned that going forward, you're going to have to meet the needs of individual customers. Could you tell me how semantics are going to pave the way for you to be able to deliver this very specialized and specific content to people?
Sure. I think one way we can do it is by using categorization and taxonomies, so that somebody who is interested in fight, so that you'll recognize a story about the F-35 is about a fighter aircraft, even if the word fighter doesn't appear in the story at all. So for the person who's a defense analyst who's tracking fighter craft information, or vendors who provide products that are limited to fighters will be able to see that and know and get the content that is of interest to them. So I think that's one way that we could improve our use of semantics. And we're doing it to some extent now with the entity recognition that we're using. And I'll be speaking about that this afternoon.
Who's applying semantics up there? Anybody else? ... Oh dear, the S word is tripping us already. I saw a couple of questions up here before. I believe you were first, sir. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Yannick Nesrik from Alcatel-Lucent. I'm interested in how do you solve the problem of information overload, be it in your readers and your users. What are some of the, and especially to Mark as well, what are some of the tools and techniques that are emerging to help people manage information overload?
It's interesting. Eric Schmidt gave a talk to the newspapers organization recently telling them to wise up, that information was abundant. And we ended up writing a blog post. It's on Kiffet's Voice. So Kiffet's Voice is a blog that I do, on how to design for abundance. And so we outlined a bunch of design principles around that. So one of the things I will say for this thing, that goes back to this idea of the cost. I'm sorry, you can sure tell I'm a researcher by the weird language I'll use. I'm going to talk about the cost structure of sense making, which is how a user manages the amount of time. In this case, it's an attention economy. The amount of time they're willing to invest looking at information of different kinds. And so this becomes a guiding force in the design of an interface then. So for example, one of the posts there, where I was talking about a user which has a variable amount of time coming to our site to get the news. What does it do if they've got a couple of minutes? How does that change if they've got like 5 minutes? What happens if they've got 20 minutes? And they're not going to say at the beginning how much time they've got. So in effect, a person subscribes to different kinds of interests. We try to give them the best overview we can across all the topics they're covering. And this is using not just topic classification, but also story hotness and story importance and a bunch of things like that we could get into. So it has to pick stories by some sets of criteria of what they will get. If you've only got a minute, this is what we're going to show you. But then as you're looking longer, it then gives you another set of overviews on each of the major areas you've got. And then what happens, and this is one of the places where I think the magic starts to happen, you're in some area, you want more, there's a drill down kind of operation, and suddenly it opens up to be not just more articles, but more topics. So suddenly you get both more organization and more articles in it. It's as if you think about those of you who use iPads and use Flipboard or something like that, and you're turning the pages, there's this metaphor of turn the page, get to the next thing, and some people say, oh, that's an outdated thing. It's like, why would we carry that over? So when we do our iPad interface, which isn't up yet, it'll work in this following different way. You'll be able to flip through pages, but since the stories are coming through with their categories, you hit the category label, and the whole thing opens up to the next level down. Now instead of getting your top levels topics or top level channels you were looking at, now you've got topics one level down. And if you're interested in, so example, I can give you a demo on this afternoon. If you're reading, like, let's say, economy and trade, and then you say, oh, economic indicators, you click that, there may be a dozen indicators that show up. Or if you're doing on health and safety, you might click on that thing that says, oh, baby products or safety or diseases or stuff like that. Click on baby products, that might bifurcate into a whole bunch of different kinds of product streams or drug streams or whatever it was that was relevant. So the idea is you can only expose a person to a little bit at a time, and they drill for more, which means there's a certain level of information they're getting all the time, and then if they have more interest, they go for another level of details and they get more stuff. So you try to give the user the tools to manage their attention budget.
Natasha, you're deep diving. Do you have anything to add on that in terms of information overload?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, many times clients will ask us to, well, the famous phrase, boil the ocean. When, we try to specifically get to what are the audiences that matter, what is the specific goal that you're trying to achieve? And then we might do some type of statistical analysis for them. We really prioritize the different types of research that we do. We give them this is what we really recommend versus, and what you need to have versus here's what's really nice to have. There's a number of folks that are still asking us to do some research that, quite frankly, we think is somewhat antiquated. And it's just not particularly relevant in the direction of where we see media going, but we try to kind of evolve them up the research chain, if you will. So, we really try to stick to priorities. And then it gets back to getting something out faster versus, taking a little bit longer and, looking at something a little more broadly. With trend analysis, though, I think sometimes we might take a little bit more time looking at trends, and we pull from a number of different resources, whether it's paid for secondary research resources or free, all social media. But that's really helped us with communication strategy, especially messaging strategy, and even product strategy. Where for a large beverage client of mine, we looked at a number of secondary research sources, media. We look at the big competitors and kind of, over a number of years, what are their marketing strategies? How do they move cyclically? Whether it's toward health and wellness, whether it's maybe some kind of sustainability for their products. So we might take a look at more of a broad base of data input from that respect, and that seems to bode for us well. And really help with keeping in front of the competitors as far as strategy.
I have to wave the flag for our friend the S word, the semantic word, in the midst of all this. Because, at the same time that we're trying to use things like taxonomies to be able to organize information, which are complicated systems, if you will, to find the simple, if we look at what's happened with content on the web, we're in an environment where we have to find simple answers to complex things. And, thinking of some of the queries that you guys were talking about, we're in a situation where, you can go out there, you can curate a collection and tag your assets and all that stuff, but a lot of the answers are, in a sense, coming from the questions. A lot of the answers are coming from, who is it that really cared about this? And when did they care about it? And where did they care about it? So, curation is, to me, one of the organization things that is allowing us through smart content to look at complex environments to be able to say, well, we don't know exactly what it is that we ought to be curating, but, we know where we should be listening.
Yeah, what's been really important to us is, in so much as we can, getting access to
our time here, so I want to see if we can take maybe one more question here, and then we'll kind of go into the lightning round here. Sir?
Larry, is this on? Yeah, Larry Proctor from IBM Research in Almaden. I just ask this from a contrarian point of view. The amount of data we have out there today, the amount of Twitters that are going on today, I think there was 7 trillion queries to Twitter a year. So we're talking about a lot of data, and we're looking at a millennia group, ages from 12 to 30, that represent 47% of the population, and they don't think like we do.
Try to speak into the mic if you could, thanks.
They don't think like we do. They think quite differently than business do today, and I've talked to a lot of businesses about text analytics, and they're at a very early stage. I think there's an Economist publication not too long ago talking about they are not preparing themselves. The companies are not preparing themselves for the onslaught of the having to sell to this age group. I just want to get what you think about that, because you're talking about stuff that is fairly standard, okay? What we're seeing, what's going to happen next 10 years won't be standard. It won't be like we do today. It'll be, I think, radically different than we do today. I think the growth of communities will change our whole concept of marketing. And I think that's going to go rapid, very rapid, lots rapider than we really think it has been. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
That kind of is useful for me because that's really our wrap-up question. You know, where is smart content really bringing us? In an era where PR Newswire is trying to reposition themselves as, you know, we can do anything for anybody anywhere with marketing. You know, what is smart content really going to be looking like in 3 to 5 years?
A little bit of shameless self-promotion, but we, as part of Edelman, we just released an 80-95 study. Studies based on the millennials, and it was all around, you know, behaviors. And so I think what's, you know, increasingly important, and to your stepson Ryan's example, is this industry's, I mean, this media form is going to continually evolve. You know, I have a good friend who just called me up and said, hey, I'm the CEO of this new monitoring company, one I'd never heard of, like number 35 for the month. But I think you know, what's increasingly important is to be studying the behavior of that particular audience and how they interact with the brands that they care about, the technologies that they use in order to be a part of their communities, and to, you know, listen and mine that kind of information and be able to, you know, help them by providing solutions that are most relevant and timely, you know, for this given audience.
I guess our project has been too small to take a big stab at all the things millennial, but we ended up having a business team where I was the oldest and the youngest was in their early 20s, and we had interns that younger than that. So part of this has been trying to shape the project and the way we engage in the sort of social side. One of the things that I enjoyed, I guess I want to make 2 points. One of them is that a lot of what we've been saying here is almost been like print on the web, you know, and I just wanted to go sideways. I've been struck by the extent to which that kind of mindset has been so engaged. If you look at the blog or the feeds, let's say you take a feed from ABC, looks like video. You take a feed from NPR, looks like radio. You take a feed from New York Times, looks like a newspaper. I mean, there's little exceptions in those things, but that's mostly true. And I don't think that, I mean, obviously everything's digital, and I mean, Negroponte and those guys have been saying this for a long time, but it strikes me how even the news organizations frame their competition without really recognizing the transformation which is taking place. On the social side, it's been striking to me that there's sort of different forces that can govern how information comes to you and how you join groups. When you're looking for information, are you looking for somebody who knows, or are you looking for the information? If you go to a curator, you're going to that curator because you believe that curator has good taste in choosing sources. If I was going to go to a site, and the site is showing things like, let me just pick on Facebook for a second.
Try to nail it so we can get on to the next thing.
Would I want to go to Facebook to find a friend who's an expert on cameras and see what they read? I mean, so there's this whole business of, again, find the person, find the information, and so on, that we're just starting to play with, and I'll leave it at that.
So, you know, what does Aviation Week look like in 3 years thanks to smart content?
Well, you know, I hope I'll have a better idea by the end of the day on where we'll be headed after listening to everybody else here. I think, you know, our future, we were talking about competitors, our future competitors probably won't be traditional publishers. What we have to worry about is competitors who come out of nowhere and eat our lunch. The way we interact with devices will change. I mean, we've seen it with the iPad, and the mouse was developed at Palo Alto.
Yeah.
In 10 years, you may only find a mouse in a museum.
That's a kind of a good segue into wrapping up, you know, my take on it. This is the future. You know, the ability to have something like this that sees, listens, moves, and understands the world as we understand that. Multiply that by 5 billion, and then multiply this by 1 trillion with the number of sensors that are out there. We're going to be awash in information, and it's not going to be drowning. We're going to be swimming in a sea. We're becoming new types of people using new types of content systems thanks to smart content. And I thank our panel for a great discussion, and I look forward to a great conference. Thank you.